The blistering August sun bore down on Willow Beckford as she stood outside the general store in Copper Creek, Colorado, clutching her empty basket while the whispers around her cut deeper than any knife could. It was 1875, and at 28 years old, she had just been publicly humiliated by Mrs. Harriet Porter, who had loudly questioned why any woman unable to fulfill her God-given duty to bear children should be allowed to participate in the town's Harvest Festival Planning Committee. Willow's cheeks burned with shame as she hurried down the dusty Main Street, her eyes fixed on the ground. 5 years of marriage to Thomas Beckford had produced no children before he succumbed to pneumonia 2 winters ago. Since then, the townsfolk's compassion had gradually transformed into judgment and suspicion. "Better make way for the barren widow," someone muttered as she passed the saloon. Willow quickened her pace, fighting back tears. Her small farm on the outskirts of town was her only refuge now, the only place where the whispers couldn't reach her. She'd managed to keep it running after Thomas died, though many in town had expected her to sell and move east to live with distant relatives. As she rounded the corner past the blacksmith shop, she collided with a solid wall of a man, her empty basket flying from her grasp. "Whoa there, madam," came a deep voice as strong hands steadied her. "My apologies." Willow looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall, broad-shouldered man with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn leather chaps over denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered Stetson. "No, it was my fault," she said, quickly retrieving her basket. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "Zeke Montgomery," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Just rode into town yesterday." "Willow Beckford," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted giving her name. New arrivals were the worst. They always wanted to know more, and then someone would fill them in on all the sordid details of her failure as a woman. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Beckford," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Though I'm sorry it had to be by nearly bowling you over." Something in his easy manner made her pause. There was no pity in his gaze, no judgment, just simple, human warmth that she'd almost forgotten existed. "Are you all right, madam? You seem troubled." Willow straightened her shoulders. "I'm fine, Mr. Montgomery, just in a hurry to get home. Can I help you with anything before you go? Carry something for you, perhaps?" "That's kind, but I have nothing to carry," she said, holding up her empty basket. "Good day, Mr. Montgomery." She hurried away, feeling his gaze on her back. It wasn't until she reached the edge of town that she realized she was clutching her basket so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The next morning, Willow was struggling to repair a section of fence when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Zeke Montgomery sat atop a magnificent chestnut gelding, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. "Mrs. Beckford," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Thought you might need a hand." Willow frowned. "Did someone send you, Mr. Montgomery?" "No, madam," he replied, looking puzzled. "I'm staying at the McAllister Ranch while I help with their cattle drive. Saw your place on my way to town yesterday and noticed that fence was giving way. Thought I'd offer my services." "I can't pay you," she said bluntly. He smiled, that same warm smile from yesterday. "Didn't ask for payment." "Then why?" Zeke removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair. "My mama raised me to help neighbors in need. Simple as that." Willow hesitated. The fence did need fixing, and her meager skills weren't up to the task. But accepting help felt dangerous. It created obligations, invited opinions, opened doors to the judgment she'd worked so hard to wall herself off from. "I won't take up much of your time," Zeke added. "Just want to make sure that fence holds before the next storm rolls in." Something in his straightforward manner disarmed her. "Very well, Mr. Montgomery. I'd appreciate the help." Zeke worked quickly and efficiently, his strong hands making short work of the repairs that would have taken her days to complete. He asked few questions and seemed content to work in companionable silence. By midday, the fence was repaired, and Willow felt obligated to offer him something. "Would you like some water or coffee before you go?" "Coffee would be mighty welcome, if it's not too much trouble." Inside her small but tidy cabin, Willow felt strangely self-conscious as she prepared the coffee. It had been months since anyone other than the occasional tradesman had crossed her threshold. "You've kept this place up well," Zeke commented, looking around appreciatively. "Not easy for one person." "It was my husband's pride and joy," she said, placing a steaming cup before him. "I couldn't bear to let it go after he passed." "Your husband had good taste," Zeke said, taking a sip, "both in land and in women." Willow felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "You're too kind, Mr. Montgomery. Zeke, please." His blue eyes met hers. "And I'm just honest, Mrs. Beckford." "Willow," she corrected softly. "Willow," he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "Beautiful name. Suits you." When he left an hour later, Willow stood on her porch watching him ride away, a strange feeling of lightness in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Over the next few weeks, Zeke found reasons to stop by her farm. Sometimes he brought fresh game, a brace of rabbits or a wild turkey. Other times he arrived with his toolbox, fixing her water pump or reinforcing the small barn's roof before she even mentioned they needed attention. Willow found herself looking forward to his visits, to his easy conversation, and the way he treated her like a person of value, not a curiosity or object of pity. He told her stories of his years working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, of the wild beauty of the territories he traversed, and of his dream to someday have a ranch of his own. "Why did you leave Texas?" she asked one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Zeke was quiet for a moment. "Lost my wife and infant son to childbed fever 3 years ago," he said finally. "Couldn't stay in a place filled with so many memories." Willow's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry, Zeke, truly. Thank you." His eyes, when they met hers, held shared understanding of grief. Folks meant well, but their pity was suffocating. Some suggested I remarry quickly, find a new woman to give me sons, as if Sarah and our boy were replaceable. Willow nodded, throat tight. "People can be cruel when they don't understand." "Like the way they treat you in town?" he asked gently. She stiffened. "You've heard the talk, then?" "Some," he admitted. "Don't put much stock in gossip myself." "It's not just gossip," Willow said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I was married for 5 years and never conceived. After Thomas died, people's sympathy lasted about as long as the funeral flowers. Now I'm just the barren widow who stubbornly refuses to know her place." "And where exactly is your place supposed to be?" "Invisible," she said bitterly. "Or back east with my husband's aunt who doesn't want me either." Zeke reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Their narrow minds can't diminish your worth, Willow, not in my eyes." The touch of his hand sent a flutter through her chest. She should pull away, propriety demanded it, but she couldn't bring herself to break the connection. "You don't understand," she whispered. "A woman who can't bear children has no future here." "Maybe the problem wasn't with you," he suggested quietly. The thought had occurred to her, but she'd never dared voice it. Thomas had been so certain the failure was hers. "It doesn't matter now," she said, finally withdrawing her hand. "My childbearing days are behind me." Zeke's expression grew serious. "Is that what you believe, or what you've been told to believe?" The question lingered between them as darkness fell. As summer gave way to autumn, Willow found herself transformed by Zeke's friendship. She began to hold her head higher in town, to meet the stares with quiet dignity rather than shame. Some noticed the change, including Clara Johnson, the midwife who had once been her friend before the whispers drove them apart. "You look well, Willow," Clara said one afternoon when they met at the mercantile. "There's color in your cheeks again." "Thank you, Clara, I feel well." The older woman hesitated. "I've seen that Montgomery fellow calling at your farm. People are talking." "People always talk," Willow replied evenly. "He seems like a good man," Clara ventured. "Not one to listen to idle gossip." "He is," Willow agreed, surprised by the midwife's apparent approval. Clara lowered her voice. "I never believed what they said about you, you know. Sometimes these things aren't meant to be, or they happen when they're meant to happen. My own mother had my youngest brother when she was nearly 40, after years of trying." The words were a balm to Willow's wounded spirit. "Thank you for saying that, Clara." That evening, when Zeke arrived with a basket of apples from the McAllister orchard, Willow greeted him with a warmer smile than usual. "You're in good spirits today," he observed, setting down the basket. "I had a surprisingly pleasant conversation with Clara Johnson. She was almost friendly." "The midwife." Zeke hung his hat on the peg by the door, a gesture that had become comfortably familiar. "Seems like a sensible woman." "She was my friend once," Willow admitted. "Before I became the town's cautionary tale." Zeke's expression darkened. "This town doesn't deserve you, Willow." "It's not all bad," she said, surprised to find she meant it. "There are good people here, too." "Like you," he said softly. His gaze was intense, making her heart race. "And you," she replied, barely above a whisper. "Willow," he said, taking a step closer. "I need to tell you something. The cattle drive ends next week. Mr. McAllister won't need extra hands until spring." Fear clutched at her heart. "You're leaving?" "That depends," he said, reaching for her hands. "I've saved enough to put a down payment on a small spread. There's good land available about 10 miles north of here." Hope rose within her, fragile but insistent. "You're staying in the area?" "I'd like to," he said, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. "But that depends on you." "On me," her voice trembled. "I've grown mighty fond of you, Willow Beckford. More than fond, if I'm being honest. I know it hasn't been long, and I know you've had your share of heartache, as have I. But I think we could build something good together." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Zeke, you know what they say about me. You deserve a woman who can give you children, a family." "I don't put stock in town gossip," he said firmly. "And I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for a chance for us to have a chance, together." What if he silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips? No what-ifs. "Just us here and now. I love you, Willow," plain and simple. The words, so long unheard, broke something open inside her. "I love you too," she whispered, and for the first time in years she felt whole. When they married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony with Clara Johnson, and a few of Zeke's cowboy friends as witnesses, the town buzzed with fresh gossip. Some expressed pity for the newcomer who'd saddled himself with a barren wife. Others wagered on how long it would be before he realized his mistake. Zeke paid them no mind as he carried his bride across the threshold of their new home, a modest cabin on a promising piece of land, with a view of the mountains and plenty of room for cattle. "Welcome home, Mrs. Montgomery," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "It's perfect," she breathed, taking in the simple furnishings he'd prepared for their arrival. "It will be," he promised, drawing her into his arms. "We'll build it together." Their early months of marriage passed in a blur of hard work and joy. They rose before dawn each day to tend to their small but growing herd of cattle. Zeke taught Willow to ride properly, and she showed him how to coax vegetables from the rocky Colorado soil. Their evenings were spent planning for the future and discovering each other with passionate tenderness that healed old wounds and forged an unbreakable bond. By spring, Willow noticed subtle changes in her body, a fullness in her breasts, a persistent queasiness in the mornings, a new sensitivity to smells. She said nothing to Zeke, afraid to hope, afraid to face disappointment again. But when her monthly courses failed to arrive for the second time, she made the journey into town to see Clara. The midwife examined her thoroughly, asking careful questions about her symptoms. "Well, Mrs. Montgomery," Clara said finally, a smile spreading across her face. "It appears you're about 3 months along. You're going to have a baby." Willow's hands flew to her stomach, disbelief and wonder warring within her. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," Clara assured her. "Everything feels as it should. The baby will come in late autumn, I expect." Tears flowed freely down Willow's cheeks. "I never thought. I had given up hope." Clara patted her hand. "Sometimes the body needs time or the right circumstances, or perhaps just the right man," she added with a knowing smile. "How do I tell him?" Willow whispered. "From the way that man looks at you, I'd say however you tell him, it will be one of the happiest moments of his life." Willow rode home slowly, one hand resting protectively over her still flat abdomen, planning how to share the miraculous news with Zeke. She found him mending a saddle on the porch, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "There's my beautiful wife," he called, setting aside his work. "How was your visit with Clara?" Willow dismounted carefully, suddenly aware of the precious life she carried. "I have something to tell you, Zeke." His expression grew concerned as he approached. "Everything all right, love?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, covering it with her own. "We're going to have a baby." Zeke froze, his eyes searching hers. "A baby, you're sure?" Willow nodded, tears threatening again. Clara confirmed it. "The baby will come in autumn." For a moment, Zeke seemed unable to speak. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled the horses in the corral, he lifted her and spun her around, his laughter mingling with her own. "Careful," she gasped through her laughter. "Your child might object to all this spinning." He set her down immediately, his hands still cradling her waist. "My child," he repeated in wonder. "Our child, Willow." The reverence in his voice made her heart swell. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said, dropping to his knees before her. He pressed his cheek against her stomach, his voice thick with emotion. "Hello in there, little one. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." News of Willow's pregnancy spread through Copper Creek like wildfire. Some expressed genuine happiness for the couple. Others raised eyebrows and whispered about miracles and suspicious timing. But the Montgomerys were too absorbed in their joy and preparations to pay much attention to town gossip. Zeke became even more protective, insisting Willow rest frequently and taking on more of the heavy work around their small ranch. She protested at times, assuring him she wasn't made of glass, but secretly treasured his concern. "My mother had 6 of us and worked in the fields until the day each one was born," she reminded him one afternoon when he scolded her for carrying a bucket of water. "Your mother wasn't married to me," he countered, taking the bucket from her hands. "Besides, I like taking care of you both." As summer progressed, Willow's body changed, her stomach rounding to accommodate their growing child. Zeke watched the transformation with awe, his calloused hands gentle as they traced the curve of her belly each night. "You think it's a boy or a girl?" he asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I'm not sure," Willow replied, smiling as the baby delivered a particularly enthusiastic kick. "This little one is certainly active, though." "Takes after its mama," Zeke teased, receiving a playful swat in return. "I want you to know," she said, turning serious, that I'll love this child with everything I am, whether boy or girl. As will I, Zeke promised, kissing her temple. I already do. In late October, after a long but relatively straightforward labor with Clara attending and Zeke refusing to leave her side despite the midwife's initial protests, Willow gave birth to a healthy baby girl with a shock of dark hair and her father's blue eyes. "She's perfect," Zeke whispered, cradling his daughter with tender care while tears streamed unashamedly down his face. "Just like her mama." "What shall we call her?" Willow asked, exhausted but radiant. Zeke studied the tiny face. "How about Hope?" "Because that's what she is, all our hopes and dreams made flesh." Hope Montgomery. Willow tried the name, feeling it settle right in her heart. "It's perfect." As autumn gave way to winter, the small family settled into a new rhythm. Hope proved to be a good-natured baby who slept well and nursed eagerly. Willow found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined, while Zeke took to fatherhood with natural ease, singing old cowboy songs to soothe the baby and handling midnight wakings without complaint. On a crisp December morning, Willow bundled Hope warmly for her first trip into town. It was time to present their daughter at church and introduce her properly to the community. She felt a flutter of nervousness as Zeke helped her into their wagon, knowing they would face many curious and perhaps judgmental eyes. "We don't have to do this today if you're not ready," Zeke said, reading her expression as he always seemed able to do. Willow squared her shoulders. "I'm ready." It's time everyone met our miracle. The small church was crowded when they arrived, and a hush fell over the congregation as they entered. Willow felt the weight of stairs as she moved down the aisle with Hope in her arms and Zeke's steadying hand at her back. They took seats near the front, and gradually the whispering subsided as the service began. Afterward, as they stood to leave, Mrs. Porter, the same woman who had humiliated Willow the previous summer, approached them with a tight smile. "So this is the Montgomery baby," she said, peering at Hope. "May I?" Willow hesitated, then carefully handed her daughter to the older woman. Mrs. Porter's expression softened as she looked down at the infant. "She's a beautiful child," she admitted, touching Hope's cheek gently. "You've been blessed indeed, Mrs. Montgomery." "Yes," Willow agreed, meeting the woman's gaze steadily. "We have." More townspeople gathered around, offering congratulations and admiring the baby. Clara Johnson appeared at Willow's side, giving her arm a supportive squeeze. "You've given them something to think about," the midwife murmured. Nothing challenges narrow minds like visible proof of their own wrongness. Later, as they drove home with Hope sleeping peacefully in Willow's arms, Zeke asked, "Was it very difficult for you today?" "Less than I expected," she replied thoughtfully. "It felt good, actually like closing a chapter." "You were magnificent," he said, his eyes warm with pride. "Both my girls were." The winter passed quietly as the Montgomerys focused on their growing daughter and expanding their small ranch. Zeke's careful management and hard work began to show results as their herd increased and their finances stabilized. Willow started a kitchen garden that yielded enough vegetables to sell the surplus, providing a modest additional income. By the time Hope celebrated her first birthday, she was walking unsteadily and babbling constantly. The small party they held included Clara Johnson, a few neighboring ranchers, and even some townspeople who had gradually warmed to the young family. "Remember when you told me a woman who couldn't bear children had no future here?" Zeke asked that night after they put Hope to bed. Willow nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I was wrong about so many things." "Not wrong," he corrected gently. "Just operating on bad information." "That's not your fault." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on me when everyone said I was barren?" "Never," he said firmly. "Even if Hope had never come along, I would consider myself the luckiest man alive to have you as my wife." "I believe you," she said, realizing it was true. In Zeke's eyes, she had always been enough exactly as she was. "Good," he said, kissing her softly, "because I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime for you," she teased. He chuckled. "I've been thinking that Hope might like a brother or sister someday. If you're amenable, of course." Willow's heart swelled with love for this man who had changed her life so completely. "I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Montgomery." "Then let's not waste any time, Mrs. Montgomery," he murmured, sweeping her into his arms and carrying her toward their bedroom. 2 years later, Willow gave birth to twin boys, Joshua and Jacob, with red hair like hers and their father's determined chin. Hope, now a chatty 3-year-old, was fascinated by her tiny brothers and appointed herself their official protector. The Montgomery Ranch prospered along with its owners. Zeke's skill with cattle and Willow's shrewd business sense proved a formidable combination. They added acreage, built a larger home, and hired 2 hands to help with the expanding operation. On a warm evening in the summer of 1882, 7 years after that fateful meeting outside the blacksmith shop, Willow sat on the porch of their home, watching Zeke teaching Hope to ride her new pony while the twins played in the grass nearby. Clara Johnson, now a regular visitor and dear friend, joined her with a cup of tea. "You've built something beautiful here," the midwife observed. "We have," Willow agreed, her eyes following her husband and daughter. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life." "You deserve every bit of it," Clara said firmly. "Both of you do." Willow thought about the lonely, shame-filled woman she had been, convinced she was somehow less than whole, less than worthy. That woman seemed like a stranger now, barely recognizable in the reflection of the confident mother and ranch wife she had become. When Zeke looked up and waved, his smile as bright and genuine as the day they'd met, Willow felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. Some called it a miracle that she had borne 3 healthy children after years of presumed barrenness. Perhaps it was. But the greater miracle, she thought, was finding a love that saw past her wounds to the woman she could become, a love that believed in possibilities when she had lost all hope. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Zeke scooped up Hope and brought her to the porch, the twins toddling behind him with chubby, determined steps. "Look at us," he said, settling beside Willow and drawing her close. "Did you ever imagine we'd have all this?" "Never," she admitted, looking around at their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, their circle of true friends. "But I'm thankful every day that you helped me imagine it." In the gathering dusk, surrounded by the family that love had built, Willow Beckford Montgomery finally understood that she had never been broken merely waiting for the right hands to help her heart bloom.